Alright, so welcome back. So in this wonderful and exciting tutorial, I'll be trying to see how to containerize an application, a Django application, and then deploy it on Kubernetes, right? So the idea, as we already saw, is that in case you are building an application, a very broad application, it may comprise of different services, like the front end, the back end. We have one for REST API, one for GraphQL, and then maybe another version with some database and some caching. And these are different services, and one of the ways is that you will want to containerize each part to make it easy for you to scale up and down, right? So how do you do that? So in case you want to learn and do it locally, so we use Kubernetes to manage all the different containers that you have provisioned in a very simple way. So what we do is that we will create a simple cluster, right? So a cluster is simply a VM, right? Cluster in English means a collection, so it's just a collection of VMs. And then within that cluster we have two main components. We have the master node, that's like the chief, the one that's going to decide everything, and we have the worker node that's going to actually run your application, right? So the master node is also called the control plane, that will handle all the communications in and out via the API server. It will also decide where to place each port. It also manage all the deployments and when to create a replica, a clone, or when to shut something down, and also has the etc that stores the cluster state. And after that's decided, then your worker node is going to run your application, and it runs it via pod. So you put your container inside a pod. So a pod is simply a wrapper around a container to make it easy to be deployed, and every pod has its own IP. You can have a pod with multiple containers. Okay, so let's see how to establish such a system locally, right? So simply you can use any of the providers, AWS, Azure DevOps, Google, but you can, in case you want to try it locally, you can use Minikube or Microk8s, right? So Microk8s is what you'll be using in this tutorial. So let's start with it. So you have already built an application, which is here, it is running. So what I want to do is that I want to containerize this, which is going to be our first step. I'll containerize it, like, and then we will put inside Docker, right? Docker image, and then we will provision from here. So let's do that. So I'll go back again to my endpoint, which is here, that we're running. As you can see, everything is working as expected. I'll come back here and let's stop this, right? So I'll come back here, and what I want to do in the same location that I have, I want to keep a VM. I want to get all the packages that we are using, right? So every package we are using, we want to get it here, right? So I'll just go with it's very important. So pip freeze, because that's the idea behind containerization. Then requirements.txt. So just going to pick everything that I had inside my virtual environment and then put inside a file called requirement.txt file, so we can package it well. Perfect. So let's stop this one, and then since the application is still running, this is the application, right? The next step is that we want to package it, right? So be in Docker to package it. So I'll go back here, the same location. We have my core project, right? The hospital, the app, and then now we have my requirement.txt that has all the applications there, right? So you can just change this one and use, let's say, 0 or whatever, right? Anyhow it is. Perfect. And then we will now create our Docker file, right? So inside the same location I have, I'm going to create another file called Docker file. That's the name. And then I'm going to specify the image I want to build from. So from base image, I'm using Python. I'm going to use a Python based image. So Python, and then I'll just use 3.9 Slim. It can be any of them. Perfect. And then I would want to set the working directory. So working directory is where I want the application to run inside the container. Got us up, and then I also copy everything from here. I'll copy from I'll first copy the requirement. So let's say copy requirement for app. So this is going to be my copy source destination. So requirement, which is this file, into my working directory. I'm copying it from here. This is the working directory in the container, to copy it, copy.txt. So I'm copying this to that particular working directory. Then I also need to update pip because I want to use pip to install. So it's going to be run, then pip3 install upgrade, because sometimes pip, and then I will now install my packages. So install packages. How do I do that? The same thing, run, then pip3 install -r my requirement.txt. And I don't want to cache, so I will just go with no cache directory, right? I don't want to cache it. Perfect. So what I want to do next is that I would want to move everything. So I want to copy all source code, right, for the app. So how do I do that? I'll just go with copy everything from my current directory to my app. So copy everything from here, everything here, right, together with this and everything, together with data, to this location here, right, to this my working directory. Then I can now run my, so let's expose the port. So as you can see, it is running on a particular port. That is why we are able to see it on this particular port is 8000. So you want to also expose that port, and we do that with the expose, and I'll specify the port, right, 8000. And then I can now run my command. So run So how did I run the app here? So if I close it, how did I run it? So I run it with this option, right? So Python manage run server. So I can also do the same thing and do cmd, the executable format. I'll just go with my Python, then another one which is manage.py, then another one which is run server, the same command there. Then I also need to specify my port, right? So since I'm using a container, I'll just go with 000 to pick the IP address of whatever container I just running in, right? Then I also specify the port 8000. So this is the port I'm listening on from the container, which is being exposed here, so that I can have access to it. So let's see if everything is working out. So this is the base image, Python image. We are creating a working directory where we work. I'll copy all the requirements, all this from here into this working directory. I'll upgrade pip and install all the packages which I had here. Requirements, I spelled it wrong. Requirement, I also spelled it wrong here, so it should have failed. Right, so perfect. So requirement, and then I'll copy everything that I have here into my app, and I would also expose the port I want to listen to, which is the port that is listening here, and this, right? So that is it. Let's save it. So I want to run it from here, right? So if I go back here, we have my Docker file here. To run it, I'm using Podman, not Docker, right? So I'll just go with Podman. Then I can just go with build -t, right? And then I can just give it the particular tag. So -t means the tag that I want to give. So I want to give it a specific name to make it easy for me. So I can call it as, let's say, hospitals API, right? Something like that. That's the name I want to give it. Then if I go with dot, it's going to create a container, right? So Podman build -t hospitals API, right? That's the name. And then I can just specify that, okay, create this, build this image. I can also do something like this, JCharisTech / right? And this is going to build an image. I'm using JCharisTech as the name, which is where I want to push it. Then I'm calling it as, okay, this is the name of the image, and then I can specify, let's say, a tag, right? So I can just say 0.0.1, something like that, right? Or 2, right? So if I go with this and I go here, now it's creating an image called JCharisTech Hospital API with a particular number there, right? It's going to build everything. You see that I got this error here. So the reason I'm getting this error because it cannot find it. So what I will do is I'll go back again to my image, to my comment, and then I'll just take off this, so it will use whatever that is available. Let's go back again and let's run it. Now you see that it's working. So it's picked the whatever Django version that was available. Now it is finishing everything. So once it's done, I can run my app, right? So we said it has been tagged. This is the name, localhost JCharisTech Hospital API with a version. And in case I want to run this, this is the container that has been spent, right? So if I go back again, I can just go with Podman images. If I go with images, see that this is the image there, right? With the particular version. I have a lot there with the tag number here. Now I can push this to Docker Hub. So if I go back to Docker Hub, so Hub Docker, and then I have my system here because I have one here some hours ago. I can push it here. And how do I do that? I can just go straight away. But before we push it, let's see if it's running first. So we'll go with Podman, right? And then I'll just run my application, right? So I want to see if it's running first before, because it's always advisable to always push, build, and then push. So Podman, I can just go with my run -p, and I specified it as 8,000, right? And for outside of the host, and 8,000 for inside the container. And the name of the repository was hospital, right? So I can just copy this. That's the name of the image or the whole thing. Cannot type, so let's copy this. Right, so this is the name of the image that we're using, right? So if I go with this and I run it, so now it's resolving, and now it's pulling the image. It's funny, it's pulling the image to build, right? That's very, very funny. The reason is they're resolving this registry, blah blah blah. So it's pulling it, right? It's funny why it's pulling. It's telling me this here does not exist. So it's pulling the old one, it's pulling this, right? So in case I want to pull another version, I can just stop this. Then I can just specify the one with the latest with the tag 0.0.1, right? And now this is telling me, okay, there was an error here, right? So I'll go back again, check my Docker file, and you can see where the error was here. So I forgot the comma. So I'll save it, and then let's build it again. I'll go back again, and then let's build. Perfect. So everything is working as expected. So the container is running, and now let's run it. So watching for file state, right? You can see that it's running. Hopefully it works. So since it's listening on port 8,000, right? So if I go back here, and then this is the old one, let's refresh. So now it's working, right? I've noticed that I've switched it off. I've switched the one here. So this is no more running. This is the old one, right? So let's stop. So it's off, right? Nothing is running, right? But now this is coming from the container. So let's see if it's actually working. If I go with list, we have it coming. So that means that this now is not coming from outside, but it's coming from my container that's being run here, right? You can see the logs here. So that is how to simply containerize your applications. If I go back and I search for something like I can give a name, so Hope. Let's see if there is a hospital called Hope. There is no hospital called, okay, there is Hope Christian, right? Hospital. There is New Hope Hospital, New Hope Clinic. So it's working, right? As you can see from here. Perfect. So we have been able to containerize our application now, which is this step here, right? We build a Docker image, we containerize it. Now we can push it to Docker Hub. So we can push the image. So I can just go back here. Let's cancel this one. And in case I want to push it, I just go with Podman, login. And I already saying, okay, no registry found in this specific location. So how do we fix it? You can simply do Podman, login, and then you can specify the registry. So I'm using docker.io, and now it's authenticating because I already have my credentials, right? In case you don't want to, you have not logged in, you can just log in, right? I already have authenticated, so I'm already logged in, and now I can push it. So Podman, I can do push, and I can specify the particular container that I want to push there, right? Or not the container but the image, which was my JCharisTech, right? There's the name of the image, and it was called Hospital API. Then the tag was 0.0.1. Then I can push it to whatever I want to push it. So I can just go with my Docker JCharisTech. Right, so I'm pushing it here to this location, to here, right? And you can also specify the container image there, but I want to push it here. So if I go with this option here, and now it's pushing it to this location. So request access to this. So it failed. The reason it failed was because I did not specify. So let's see. Yeah, I did not specify. So I can specify the location where it's going. So I can just go back again. So it's supposed to be docker.jcharisTech, then my name, which is hospitals API, right? And I can just give the version. So version 0.01. It's pushing it. Because I have a tag there, right? It's going to push it with that particular tag. There, perfect. So that's pushed it to my container. So if I refresh it, you can see that we had it less than a minute ago, right? And then if I click on it, you can see the name, so hospital API, and then you can see that this is the latest, and this is the version, right? 0.01. Very cool. So this is how to build the image, and then you push it somewhere, right? The reason is that when you are pushing it somewhere, it allows you to pull it with Kubernetes. You can also push it to your local registry and then pull it when you are building. Okay. So we have seen how to build our image and then push it to Docker Hub, right? Now, how do we use it in Kubernetes? How do we provision it, right, with Kubernetes? So first we'll be using Microk8. So I'll come back again. In case you do not have Microk8, so let's go back here, split. In case you do not have Microk8, you can just use, there are several ways you can install Microk8. So one of them is to use multipass, right? There are several ways you can install it, but you can also use let's call it like this. So Microk8 snap install, right? So there are several ways you can install it. You can install it with this option here. You can also install it with WSL, Windows subsystem for Linux. You can install it in multipass. I already have multipass, so since I already have, let's get it from here. since I already have multipass, I can list my VMs, right? So I already have multipass and I've created a VM. So based on the image I specified here, we mentioned that to be able to create your own cluster, you need a VM. A cluster is simply a VM. So how do we do that? We have to create a VM, right? And then we have already created a VM with multipass. So in case you don't have, you can install multipass. And then this is my Microk8s VM running, and then I can move into it. So I can do multipass. You can also create your own VM, right, by going with the launch. So if I go with launch, you can just specify all the commands that you need in case you want to create your own Microk8s. So for example, like in case I want to create a new one, it's a simple way. Multipass is a simple way to create VMs, right? I can just go the name of my container, so I can just call it as say mega whatever, mega K8s, right, VM, right? And then I'll just specify the CPU cores that I want. So I want 2. I'll specify the memory. So let's say I want 10 gigabyte for this VM, and then let's say there is a memory is just 2, and then I can make it 4 as you wish, 2, and then the data for the drive, I can just specify, let's say 10 gigabyte, right? So this is a simple way to create a VM, right, with this particular approach. Now after you have created it, you can now, I don't want to create it because it takes some time, you can now launch into it. So multipass shell, then I can just go with Microk8s VM, and this is going to load or SSH into it, right? So you can see the name has changed, so it's an Ubuntu VM Microk8s, right? Now let's install Snap. So if I go back, not install Snap, I already have Snap. So the Snap is there. So in case I want to install Microk8, I can simply do my, let's see if it's there. So Microk8s. I do not have it, so to install I just go with this option here, and I want to install the most recent option, which is using this option here. So I'll copy this one and then I will use it here. So it's going to install the newest version, right, 1.3. so in case you are watching from the future, this may have changed, so it's going to take some time. So this is, we have our VM, and I've created Microk8 within our VM, which is going to be used to orchestrate or work with Kubernetes, right? Perfect. Now if I go with Microk8s version, now it's a version I have, and I can just go with the stats. If I go with stats, or status, it'll tell me the status is not running, so to status I can just go with stat. If I go with stat, now it's started. I can also check it from here. If I go to Hyper-V on Windows, you can see that we have my Microk8 already running, right? So this is a virtual machine. You can also create one here, quickly create a new VM from here. And you can also see the specs of it by going to the settings. You can see the size, the memory is 4 megabytes, and then the processor is 2. You can also modify it as you wish. Okay, now let's see how to install or to work with it, right? So Microk8 comes with its own Kubernetes. So if I go with kubectl, I can just go with kubectl, and I can just go with my get pods, right? If there's any pods running, it's going to tell me. So say no resources found in default namespace. So what is a namespace? So a namespace is simply a way in which you can combine whatever you're doing in one space to make it easy, right? So in case I want to list all the namespace, I can just go with namespace, and now these are all the namespace. So this is the default namespace. There is a kube public, kube system namespace, right? Perfect. Okay, so after I've done it, I need to add my Microk8 to the group of users here. So how do I do that? First, I will just go back again, and then I'll paste in this command here. Right, so what I'm saying that, okay, add a new user called Ubuntu to the group called Microk8s, right? And then I also need to specify this command to own that particular directory. Perfect. Then sometimes it's also important to allow IP tables to do port forwarding. So these are the three stuff. Okay. So let's see how to work with Microk8. So as I said earlier on, the idea is that with Microk8 you can quickly spin up your own cluster, right? And with the cluster you can spin up your own pod, and then which will be within a worker node, and you can also create nodes and join nodes and the rest. And we use kubectl to be able to talk with the API, right, to be able to do the management and stuff. Okay, so in case I want to quickly run a pod, I can just go back with the same thing I did. So Microk8, I can quickly run a pod like say kubectl get pods. Instead there's no pods there, I can specify the namespace with name, right? And I can just give it a particular name. It's supposed to be namespace, right? And I can just specify say default or kube system, right? So these are all the pods that are running on that particular namespace, right? So namespace allows you to be able to group pods in a specific space to make it easy. So let's go back again and let me create. We don't have any pods there, but in case I want to create a simple pod, I can just go to run, right? And then let's say pod 01. Then I can just specify the image, then nginx, or it can be anything, so Python or whatever. So in Python, as you saw earlier on, if we're using Docker, right? So Kubernetes is simply something like a way you can run all the Docker commands, but in a simple way without using Docker, right? So normally, in case we're working with Docker, we could have done something like this. So Docker or Podman, you would have done say run, then you specify the particular image that you want. So let's say I wanted nginx or whatever image, like as we did previously. We could have done something like that, right? So in case I wanted to specify tangents for an example, that would be easy. I would have done so p, right, and a port, and I'll specify 8080. Then I would have done another port, then the name of the image, which was, let's say, some image, right? This is how you would have run for Podman. But with Microk8 or with Kubernetes, it's just go with this option here. Then I'll specify the name of the image. So this, we do not specify the image, right? But to work with this, you just have to go with so run. Then you give the name of the image, so image that I want. So let's say nginx, and then I can also give the pod, right? So the name of the pod. So the pod can be, let's say, pod 01, right? So something like this. So this is a simple way you can create a pod inside Kubernetes, right? So using kubectl to run the pod and then the image, which is similar to this command here, right? So run, same run, then the image, this time you're calling the image, and then whatever you wanted to do, right? So if I run it this way, the terminal has created a pod. Now if I can go back again and get that pod, so get pod. Instead now one pod is running, right? So how do we access this particular pod? So the pod is running, we have created a pod, and this pod has an IP. So any pod has an IP, so output wide, it's going to tell, okay, this pod, this nginx is running on this particular IP address. So can I access it from here? If I go back and I copy this to my system here and I paste it here, is it running? No, right? So it is not running. So why is it not running? Because it's not exposed yet. Although it is running, right? I can do this within my VM. I can still access it. So if I do curl, then I do http this, right? So now it's running. So welcome to Nginx. So within the VM, it is working. So within this VM that we have, we can still access it, but we cannot access it outside, right? Outside my VM. So how do we do that? So to be able to access it, we have to use the cluster ID, the IP of this VM, not the VM of this, right? I said the IP. This IP here belongs to this pod, but the cluster itself has its own, right? This particular VM has its own IP. So that is what we need to be able to access it. So we can just do this IP, okay, and then I will need this particular port, this IP, to be able to access it outside. So I have to copy this one. Instead of using this one, I will now have to use this. If I run it, we cannot still see it, right? So the reason we cannot see that, this one requires you to expose it, right? So that is the IP, but how is it being seen outside? Right? Let me draw it so that you can understand. So we have a pod. So let's call this as my pod, right? And this pod has its own IP address. Right, so it has its own IP. And then this, so we can within, and this is our VM, this is within our VM, right? Or whatever, right? Our cluster, whatever. But the cluster also needs its own, also has its own IP, right? And then your pod has its own IP, but we need a way we can communicate with, in case we have another pod or we want to communicate with outside, right? So this is pod 2 with IP address 2. How do we do that? So that is where we use a service. So a service is another way, so we call it as a service. That is going to allow us to be able to communicate with each one another as well as outside the world, right? And we do that by exposing or creating an Nginx service. So we'll go back again, and inside the same VM, I can just go back to Microk8s kubectl. Then I can specify that expose my pod, right? Which was pod 01. Oh, I hope that was the name. Here, yeah, pod 01. So expose my pod 01, and then create a service. So I'll call this Nginx SVC. Then I'll call this type. The type is a node pod. So there are different types of services. We have a cluster, we have load balancer, we have node pod, and the rest, right? So I want it to be a node pod. And then I'll specify the port I want to listen on. So port 80. So this is going to expose this particular service there. Now if I go back again, I can do Microk8s kubectl service, or I can just go with service, right? So we can just go with get C, and then you can see that now we have my cluster IP, right, for Kubernetes, and then we have my this particular service that I created with its own IP address, right? And this one is listening on port 80, so it's whatever channel is coming from my pod here is being forwarded to this particular service IP, and then I can have access to it, something like that, right? So now this is 80, so I can now listen on this particular port. And then if I go back here, so now welcome to internet, right? So this is how to connect to the outside world. So we have our own port that is having this IP, and then we have now created a service that allows us to be able to talk within our port as well as to the outside board. And then we are exposing to port 80 with this particular service. Perfect. And now we can have access to it here. So that is how to work with the connection, right? Perfect. So in the next session, we'll be trying to see, we have seen a simple introduction. Now in the next session, we'll be trying to see how to actually deploy our app itself. Before we go on, there is also something you can also do in case you also want to monitor all of these things, right? You can also work on it. So we'll be seeing that in the next session. So thank you for watching. See you in the next session. Stay blessed.